Good morning. Welcome to Hobby Evolution, episode 408. Welcome. It is a Monday. Hope you had a great weekend. I did. And if you've paid attention to my YouTube channel over the weekend, you have seen that firsthand. I went live Saturday morning. I put together a strategy for the Oak Creek Card Show. I did a quick hit 2-minute video from the parking lot. In fact, it was a Target parking lot outside the card show, going over my budget, what I bought, and then long form on Sunday morning on Hobby Evolution, yesterday morning, talking about those purchases and showing off all of the dime and quarter cards that I rescued from those bargain boxes. So you can check those videos out. And then last night, since my wife was watching Yellowstone and I just have no interest in that show, I hung out down in the basement, and I'm like, I'm going to rip this 91 Upper Deck football. I bought it at the Rockford Card Show last month, and it was a total nostalgia buy. Paid $20 for it. It was the very first hobby box I ever opened. As a kid, I was 9 years old in 1991, Christmas. It was under the tree. Thanks, Santa. So opened that last night. I pulled the Brett Favre last night, and also the Falcons were on the rookie force checklist with the quarterback Brett Favre right there in front with fellow Falcons Mo Gardner, Eric Pegram, Bruce Pickens, and Mike Pritchard. So pulled those cards out of there. Pulled two James Brooks holograms. The first hologram I pulled was for Zach, the Neil Anderson. Zach, good morning. Jenny, good morning. Brad, what's up? So plenty of videos. eBay sales were overwhelming through the weekend. I shipped all day yesterday into the night. I still have 80 to go. So I like the trajectory that we're going. I thought I was going to get mostly caught up to a point where I would be comfortable adding more cards today, but I just, with the sales the way they were last night, I'm probably just going to use today as another ship day. I did list some random singles last night, but nothing file exchange where I'm putting in 200 cards. So I'll probably put that off another day and get caught up with some of the shipments. Brad's behind on video watching. Good day. What's up, card collecting addict? Jenny said I made one eBay sale, LOL, late last night, but trades I got to ship on Fire Trading. Awesome. So that's where I'm at regarding the eBay stuff. I wanted to talk about kids in the hobby. And thanks to Zach for this topic. He brought it up. We hung out at the card show in Oak Creek on Saturday, and Porter had a day. Porter's Zach's son, and like all the vendors were just like giving him stuff and giving all kids stuff, and that's something that Zach and I were talking about. It's like, man, when in 1991, 30 years ago, we were going to card shows, and there was nothing free for kids. Vendors didn't give kids anything that I remember. None of the card shows I went to, and I went to a lot of card shows. They were if you think they were everywhere now, if you weren't around in the hobby 30 years ago, there was a card show in every small town. In rural Illinois, in rural America, there was a card show on every corner. Like there's a Casey's gas station in every small town throughout Illinois, Iowa, and probably Minnesota. So there was always a card show. There were card shops in about every town. And the only time, and you remember these things, like if you're a kid and you get like a pack of cards or a free, whoever you're a fan of, and they're like, here, you can have this card. Like you remember that as a kid. And I don't remember any of that as a kid. I remember the only free thing I remember getting from a card show or a card shop was actually my brother's best friend owned a card shop in a small town, a neighboring town, And my grandma lived in that town. So I would visit grandma. Like some days she would babysit me, like in the summer. So I would spend time. And this was the day, and this is something else Zach and I joked about was um, our parents could drop you off. Our parents dropped us off at a card show, 9 years old. Mom drops us off. She goes to Walmart or wherever, does her shopping. And here we are just on our own. At least my mom did that. 9 years old, I'm walking around with, no adult supervision at a card show or a card shop. In fact, that was what happened a lot. She would go get groceries. Usually her grocery shopping was in Geneseo. Shout out Jeremy. And she dropped me off at Hart's Card Shop in Geneseo. And I never got any free stuff. I never got any free stuff at the card shop. But my brother's friend who owned the card shop, I remember the summer of probably 1990. I was at grandma's and I walked uptown, which was probably, I don't know, 3-4 blocks from where she lived. And here I am, 8 years old, walking by myself down to the local card shop and grocery store, because the grocery stores, the small IGAs had packs of cards back then. And I remember going to the card shop and Big Daddy's there, and he's like, here, and he gives me, remember the Topps coins. In fact, I had some next to me, not anymore, but the Topps coins from like 1990, and they came in those small little 3-pack. I think it was 2 or 3 coins per pack, and he gave me a pack of the coins, and they probably weren't, I don't know what they were, 25 cents, maybe 50 cents. But to a kid, and that's the only thing I ever remember getting from a card show or a card shop. The hobby wasn't kid friendly in 1991. And I think we are, now that we're in our 30s and 40s, we look back on that time of the 80s and 90s and think, oh, the hobby was so much more kid friendly because we were kids and you could afford packs of cards. Yes, they were 50 cents. Now they're, $5? I mean, you can get some of the cheaper packs for a couple bucks. I get it. But on that point, remember, I couldn't afford Upper Deck in 1989 or 1990. Action Packed Football, when it came out, was like $3 a pack. Leaf, $3 a pack. There were premium, packs. I couldn't get that good stuff. And now it's like, and I never hear the kids complaining at card shows about the price of cards, but I sure hear the dads complain about the prices of, well, when I was a kid, we could afford packs of baseball cards. Yeah, you could, and kids today can afford packs of cards. I'm sorry they can't afford the Prism, but we couldn't afford Upper Deck Leaf Action Pack in 1990. So nothing has really changed. Take into account inflation, and I've done the numbers. Yes, I know that a 50-cent pack in 1990 is not the same as what you would pay for a pack of Topps in 2021. I know there's a difference, but there's also premium cards today. In 1990, you got a bunch of base cards. In 2021, you've got a chance at autographs and jersey relics and short prints and all of these inserts and cards that are more valuable than what a base card in 1990 cost. I'm going to go to the chat real quick. Let's see. The Faltsy, what's up? There's a Casey's gas station on every street corner in Iowa. Yes, sir, there is. Those folks were a bunch of Scrooges back then, LOL. What's up, Diego? Yeah, and today, when I walk around card shows and I never really, Zach pointed this out, and he has a kid. I don't have a kid, so I have a different, kind of a different perspective as a non-parent. But I see, and you see the thumbnail. If you see the thumbnail to this video, that was a picture I took at my card show a couple months ago. I did ask the parents' permission. That's another thing that's changed. Now we have to get permission to take pictures of kids, and it's kind of one of those things. It's like, so I saw the mom, and I'm like, can I take a picture of? Is that your son? Can I take a picture? I'm the promoter of the show. I'd like to use this because it was 2 kids making a trade, and that's what you like to see. the kids wheeling and dealing, and it doesn't matter if they have a Pelican case. I know they've got a Pelican case. They're not real collectors, and that's a bunch of baloney. If they have a Pelican, and I can't remember who I heard on another video or podcast recently say that, like, it doesn't matter if they have a Pelican case, or it might have been Jeremy Lee on Saturday night's Sports Card Live. I think they were talking about kids in the hobby as well. And it doesn't matter if they have a Pelican case or, I used to carry my cards around in a McDonald's lunchbox. You know, those plastic lunch boxes that you got with a Happy Meal? Like, that's what I carried my cards unprotected. Like, I didn't care. I just loved having cut, and a lot of these were like my Cubs collection, like all 100 Cubs baseball cards that I had in my collection in 1989-90 were in this McDonald's lunch pail. So it doesn't matter if it's a beat up old lunch box or if it's a Pelican case. Like, it's great to have kids in the hobby, and it's great to see them wheeling and dealing. And, the older they get, then you see some of the junior high age and high school age, and they've got the Pelican cases, and they're like, they're wheeling and dealing. And it's great to see. Bo, you did watch Porter for 60 seconds, so that counted. That's true. Zach went to the restroom, and I babysat for 60 seconds at the dime box. Porter and I were digging through the dime boxes. So it's so much different. And Zach, add anything that comes to mind in the chat. And he says 2 reasons Porter had a day: a lot of White Sox fan vendors who liked seeing a Sox kid. And I can see that because, in the Chicago area, there's a lot more Cubs fans than White Sox fans. So I can understand that from that perspective, where, it's kind of like this, White Sox fans are kind of like a small fraternity. So I can understand. Dealers flat out said they don't want kids to get discouraged from joining. That is great. That is so awesome. I know there's a lot of vendors, and I need to do a better part at my show promoting to kids and in offering, and I've got a couple of weeks to figure out what to do. Making like a kids grab bag. The guys in Rockford do an awesome job. They do a free kids break. So that's something that I really enjoy. So, it's like we never had I know breaks weren't a thing 30 years ago, but it's those things that, the adults, and maybe it is because we didn't have like those types of experiences as a kid collector in the late 80s, early 90s, where it was, everybody says, not everybody, a lot of people, you hear a lot of it like, well, the hobby's all about the money today. It wasn't like that in the 80s or 90s. Yes, it was. And it probably was more of an extent. Yes, there are investors now. There's big money in the hobby, but the core, and if you're watching this video, I would consider a core collector. I'm not going to use the real collector term. It's not the same thing. I hate that. Every collector is a real collector, no matter if they're investing fractional ownership in a mantle, or if they own the mantle, or if they have Pelican cases or whatever. Everybody's a real collector. But the core collectors and the blue collar collectors that are just, going to card shows, picking up some cards they like, or to flip, either way. I don't even know where I was going with that thought, but that's kind of, that's where we're at. I was talking about the money, and it was more about the money back then. Like, there were door prizes and stuff like that, but it wasn't kid friendly. Like, it just wasn't kid friendly. Everybody was out to make a buck. And there was a ton of, look at like the Broder cards, people like making counterfeit cards, the unlicensed stuff. I mean, it was like, once the money poured in, all of these, there were a lot of people out taking advantage of the hobby, with counterfeit cards and unlicensed cards. There were very few freebies. There was not much interest in getting kids into the hobby. So yeah, I think it was more about the money 30 years ago than what it is today. Zach says everyone who has done a good deed for P has a story where someone did something for them, paying it forward. And yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. What's up? There's Jeremy. Jeremy, I dropped a Heart sports card reference earlier in the video. Geneseo shout out. What was cool for me, I am teaching Porter how to search for others. He found a card for Texas Card Dude and Diego. He has no friends who trade cards yet, probably why dealers are eager. And that's an interesting point. And I also, I see a lot of kids at these shows, and there's a lot of kids that come to my show. I saw a lot of kids at the Oak Creek show. There's a lot of kids that go to the Rockford show. Those are the shows that recent memory. But I still hear stories about, like in Porter's situation, where he doesn't really have friends to trade with. And I even, Brody has mentioned, Brody the kid has mentioned that on Hobby Hotline, where his friends really aren't interested. Some of them, I think he's mentioned some are on the periphery, but he really doesn't have any friends that are in the hobby that he trades with. So it's still like there's still a lot of room to grow in that sense. Zach says it probably helps that people are booming right now. Saltiness would not entice generosity. That's another good point. The last year and a half, going on 2 years now, and really the hobby boom started in 2018, and it just kind of went parabolic in April, May, June of 2020. But the hobby I was already priced out on a lot of product in 2018, 2 years before the boom. Bowman prices, and I've mentioned this ad nauseum, where my 2017 case of Bowman was $797, and in 2018 it went to like $1,800. It more than doubled in price, and look what it is now. It's like $3,200 to $3,600 for a case of Bowman, what I was paying around $800 just 4 years ago. So that boom started. It all started with Aaron Judge. In fact, it was 2017 when it started, when the ascent, I think it was on the rise for a few years. We just didn't realize it until Judge Mania hit in 2017. That's when you started seeing some mainstream media picking up on prices of Aaron Judge cards. I know there was a big news story that was making its rounds about a guy who went all in on Aaron Judge prospecting, and when he had his big run in the summer of 2017, made bank on some of those cards. So that's really when the increase, the hobby boom started. It wasn't overnight, where it does kind of seem like it was, because it did like parabolic is the best word to use to describe what happened last spring and summer to the hobby, because it really did. But it was already on an ascent for 2 years in the making, and then all of a sudden, it's going like this, and then all of a sudden, whoop, and it went straight up. And now we're kind of, it's on kind of a downward trend, but there's still a lot of money being spent. It's just being spent in different ways. But we are seeing a decrease in traffic, and all that. But that's another point. Jenny says, I don't really have friends to trade with, but I consider all my online friends my friends to trade with. Just got to find the collectors. And that's where I was at. When I lived in Illinois, I actually had some friends that, kind of got me back into the hobby. And Kyle moved to Minnesota. Arnie, Dave is still in Illinois. We actually meet up, go to the National, and we'll go to the Spectacular and meet up. But when I came to Wisconsin, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have any friends in the hobby, but start a card show. Start a card show, and you'll meet a bunch of new friends from your area. And so now it's like, Johnny, who is my co-promoter, he has since moved to Texas. He was in real estate, worked for the same company as my wife, and saw my wife would, share some of my baseball card nuggets on Facebook. And so he friended me and he's like, hey, I work with your, same company as your wife. So, and then we're on Twitter following each other. And then he's like, hey, have you ever thought of starting a card show? And that's where it all began. And now I've met, a bunch of friends that, people that I consider friends that we buy and sell baseball cards at the card show, and have become friends. So Jenny, start a card show, and you'll meet new friends. Let's see, card collecting addict Brad. I got a couple tables for Longview. I'm going to be there. Brad's going to be in Longview, Texas. Diego says Hobby Hotline talked about how trade is basically rack or care packages. Yeah, and there's a lot of that as well. So that was something interesting that I thought would make for a great topic of discussion. And if I've missed anything, Zach, that you thought of, or if anybody else in the chat has their own personal takes on kids in the hobby, if you have kids, or just what you've seen in the hobby. But I feel that the hobby is in a better place now for kids than what it's ever been in my memory, which only goes back 32, 33 years, back to the late 80s when I was, just getting started as a young child in the hobby. And there was always the talk, back in 2012 is kind of when I dipped my toes back. I never really fully was out of the hobby. I definitely had, a foot and a half out the door. But I always kept like a toe in the door in the hobby, and I would, jump in for a couple of years, jump out, and whatnot. So in the 2000s, kind of like the dead period, I'd be on the old Beckett message boards, and the always the big topics and even blowout forums. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, it was always like, we need kids in the hobby. We need kids in the hobby. Well, now kids are in the hobby, but it's like, well, they have Pelican cases. It's like, no, kids are still in the hobby. Just because they have a bigger budget than what you or I had in 1991 doesn't mean they're not a real collector or anything of the like. I think we've done a really good job in the last 5 years, because we went 30 years. We missed a generation. There's a generation that really wasn't into cards, and I think that's starting to, I think with COVID, last spring and summer, that got some new interest. I've met younger adults that cards were never really a thing when they were growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. It wasn't really a thing, and so they're in it for the first time. And then there's guys like my age that were in it in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and with being stuck inside, they're going back through their closets and basements looking at their childhood collections, and now they jump back in and they have kids, and they're getting their kids back into the hobby. What's up, Andrew? Good morning. Jenny's been adding cards on TCDB like crazy. Brad says you should see Aiden at a card show. That kid banks and gets freebies from everyone. That's awesome. DR, what's up? One thing I love is being a 38-year-old big kid in the hobby. Cards definitely keep you young if you have fun with them. Definitely. Like it used to be kind of like, it was almost like a secret society. Like, you would, and I say this because Saturday night when we went to dinner, it was friends of ours. It was actually her 40th birthday celebration a year late. Her birthday was last week. It was her 41st birthday, but she didn't have a 40th birthday party because of COVID. So we did the big party at the pizza place downtown. And so it was actually a lot of their friends that we had never met before. So, you're doing all the small talk. What do you do? Where do you live? Blah, 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 blah. So we were sitting down, and it was like once the pizza had come out, and so we're all sitting down, and they they ask, so what do you do? And I said, well, that's interesting. I just quit my job to sell baseball cards. And it's like, how do you say that when like you're having like an adult conversation and the question comes to, what do you do? Well, I quit my job to sell baseball cards. So that was that was an icebreaker. So yeah, so it does it like last night I was opening the 91 Upper Deck. It was total nostalgia. It was $20 that, and this is the thing that I love, that even though it's a full-time business now for me, I still love baseball cards, and I still in football cards, and I'm definitely on a spending somewhat of a spending freeze when it comes to what I enjoy and what Cubs and what I buy. But there's going to be some, I pulled some wrestling cards out of the 25-cent box, and it was mostly just for nostalgia, and I'll put them on eBay, but it's just fun to have them, for whatever time I have them. It's fun to, look at the backs, and they'll go in a box and I'll put them on eBay, but it's still like that nostalgia takes me back to when I was a big wrestling fan in the mid 90s. And like the 91 Upper Deck box, like just opening that box and pulling that Brett Favre, although pulling the Brett Favre was a little different for me than it was 30 years ago, because that card was like, Brett Favre was just what was he? Was he a second round pick? Which is actually fairly high for he was a 33rd second round selection for the Falcons. So it wasn't like he wasn't Dan McGuire. He wasn't Todd Marinovich. So he wasn't like the it card to have. There was we were chasing holograms. We were chasing Joe Montana. We were chasing Dan McGuire and Todd Marinovich and some of those guys. Brett Favre was just kind of, so it didn't have that same, like if it was 89 Upper Deck, you're chasing Ken Griffey Jr., just like you would have chased in 1989. So it was a little different, but it was still a lot of fun. Those holograms, whenever I see holograms, it takes me back as a kid. Porter is 8. Most kids I saw were 11 or up. I see teens, not many kids. That's a great observation. I do see many more older kids, in what I mean by older is junior high to high school. And that is an interesting observation, because now that I think back, I don't see too many people bringing kids. I don't see too many moms and dads bringing kids Porter's age in that 6, 7. And actually, when I was 6, I wasn't really I was like Porter's age. I was 7 when I really got interested in cards. Like when I was really collecting and buying packs of cards with my measly allowance, I was 7, 1989. So in Porter's 8, so I was Porter's age. That was like my wheelhouse. So it is interesting not to see as many kids that age. Ryan, good morning. I have 2 kids that love collecting Pokemon cards, but now they're hard to find. So getting them to collect a bit of hockey and baseball, now chasing cards they like the look of. That's something I'm seeing more at my show. I had a lot of Pokemon dealers at my card show in October. And I think that may have had something to do with, there was a big game hole con, which I think it's like the more gaming than anything, but I think that attracted some Pokemon and Magic collectors. And so I probably had 3 or 4 like Pokemon centric dealers at the show, which I found interesting. One of the dealers is going to be back. I think one is not going to be. So I know I'll have at least 1 or 2. Aiden is awesome to be around. The kid has a very high dollar collection, would make people envious, and still loves the 99-cent cards and opening up packs of everything. That's great. Best of both worlds. Zach says, I sell collectibles full time, or as a business owner. I like the entrepreneur idea. Yeah, and that's kind of like I've said that I started my own business selling collectibles. Back then, the second round meant more because there was 12 rounds. Favre was no Andre Ware or Jeff George. No, he wasn't. In fact, how many quarterbacks was, it may say it on the back of his card, but I think that was a pretty heavy quarterback class in 91. I'm just wondering, 1991 NFL draft. I know there was at least 2 or 3 quarterbacks picked ahead of him. So the number 1 pick that year, Russell, Maryland. Dallas Cowboys, Brad's Dallas Cowboys, Eric Turner, Bruce Pickens, who went to the Falcons, Mike Kroll, and Todd Light. That was your top 5. What a draft. Some other names in the first round: Herman Moore, Alvin Harper. So the Cowboys had the number 1 and number 12 pick. Wow. So the first quarterback, I don't think you'll ever see an NFL draft position-wise like this. Actually, next year's draft may be like this because there's not too many quarterbacks a lot of the quarterback draft stock has fallen off this year. Dan McGuire was the first quarterback taken, number 16 overall. Marinovich went 24th overall. And then Favre was the 3rd quarterback taken at 33 in the 2nd round. And then right behind him was Jets legend Browning Nagel. Who else? So there were 4 taken in the first 2 rounds. Let's see, who else was? Scott Zolak was a 4th round quarterback selection. Donald Hollis, he went to Rice. He went 1 pick ahead of Rocket Ishmael, 4th rounder to the Raiders. But that was because Ishmael dropped so far because of the signing. I think he ended up going to the CFL. Bill Musgrave, isn't he a coach now? He went in the 4th round. These are all quarterbacks. Craig Erickson, Miami Hurricanes. Wow, he went in the 5th round. Let's see, going on to the 6th round. I'm looking at quarterbacks drafted in 1991. Sorry, I totally am going off the rails. Paul Justin, he was a Bears quarterback. He was in the 7th round. And yeah, just like Brad mentioned, there were 12 rounds in 91. No picks in the 8th round for quarterbacks. None went in the 9th round. In the 10th round, Pat O'Hara, where'd he go? USC. He went to the Buccaneers. I'm almost done now. The 11th round, Sean Moore. He did play a little bit. He went to the Denver Broncos. He played at Virginia. That's the 11th. 12th round, Jeff Bridewell from UC Davis was a Cardinals draft pick. And the last, Mr. Irrelevant, Larry Wanke from John Carroll College. He was the very last selection and went to the New York Giants. Kanan Mcardle was a 12th round pick. He had a good career. He had a productive career. Wow, Kanan Mcardle played. Wow, he retired in 2007. He had a long career. Kanan Mcardle was one of the last picks, 12th round pick in 1991. Okay, I apologize. So let's see. My son. I'm going to go back to Diego's comment. I lost it. My son is almost there, and he is 5. That's good to hear. I think as more kids 5 to 12 become vaccinated, parents will feel more comfortable bringing them to card shows in 2022. That's a good point. There's the vaccination for what, kids 5 to 12, 5 to 11 just began. At least here. A friend of mine's son was one of the first kids in Dane County to be vaccinated. And he's right in that age range. I think he's 11. So yeah, that's a great point. Like once, the vaccine gets around for that age group more and more, kids that age will be out and about. The attention span is still short for Diego. Jenny says, my friend owns a video game store that does Pokemon and Magic. He has hated this card boom. People are fighting over the new products that come in. Zach drops the Browning Nagel bomb. Going to watch the Bears tonight. Yes. Unfortunately, I probably will. Monday Night Football, the Steelers. My fantasy team got smoked yesterday, so it's probably just going to be a really crappy football weekend for me. Herschel Walker trade. How the boys got those picks. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Rocket played for the Toronto Argonauts. Yes, CFL cards were big. CFL cards were big, especially those Rocket Ishmael cards. And he had a Notre Dame card in 91 Pro Set. That was, man, Rocket Ishmael cards were the cards to have in 1991, whether it be the Pro Set or the CFL cards. I think there might have been some like classic, those classic cards, classic draft picks cards. So yeah, the Rocket was one to have. Brad says, what is fantasy football again? It's something I suck at. That's one thing it is. I was having a great run, and I always say, I'm like, I'm going to miss the playoffs again this year. But I was, I think, in second place after a few weeks, and then I think I've lost like 4 weeks in a row. So I'm on the outside looking in. My team sucks. That's what it was. So yeah, that's what I had for today. Appreciate the great chat, Zach. Thank you for bringing up the topic for today. Jason Garrett in that 91 AFL set. Yeah, the World Football League. Jason Garrett was in there. If you're a wrestling fan, I know not too many people are in here, but John Bradshaw Layfield was in that World League football set in 91 Pro Set. JBL, he's I think he won like 3. I think he was the WWE champion 3 times maybe. But yeah, he has a card in that World League football set as well. And there's some other guys that, went on. The Seahawks had a quarterback that was in there that, was it Gelbach, Stan Gelbach? I can't remember, but there were a few guys that had some careers and just some interesting, like the John Layfield. When I saw that card, I was sorting through cards one day and I saw John Layfield and I'm like, is this the John Layfield? That's awesome. So yeah, thanks again. Brad's going to be going live on his channel, Texas Card Dude. Check that out. Herman and Ken will be going live tonight, 7 p.m. Central, on Hobby Chat on 3B Collections channel. So check that out. Have a great Monday, and we'll talk tomorrow.